Everybody can hear me? Is that all right? So if I just talk normally like this, I don't have to yell or anything like that? Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Gavin Luter, and I'm director of the UniverCity Alliance on campus here. Some of you may be thinking, what is the UniverCity Alliance? Great that you showed up, because I'm going to explain exactly what that is. But I'm going to focus on an initiative that we run called the UniverCity Year effort, but I'll explain that later. So I am relatively new to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, about 6 months. And since coming here, the Wisconsin idea seems to be on the tip of everyone's tongue lately. Almost any time the university does something in the community, people say, well, that's the Wisconsin idea. Hey, yeah, we're out there. We're in the real world. Every time we step off campus, that's the Wisconsin idea. What worries me is that that people understand the Wisconsin idea as anything that the university does that reaches out into the community. I'm sure it's a great public relations strategy. We all know that. The university loves good PR. But I actually wonder if people are truly grasping the heart of what the Wisconsin idea is, emphasis on the Wisconsin, as Gwen would say. Many of you all have probably heard from Gwen. I was actually honored that Gwen showed up for my talk, so thanks a lot, Gwen. Wave your hand. She's done a great job of laying out what exactly the Wisconsin idea is and what it is not. And hopefully most of you all know this, and hopefully this will not be a surprise to you. But making knowledge available as broadly as possible to Wisconsinites so they can keep both the governance and the economy of Wisconsin in the hands of Wisconsinites themselves and not in the hands of the few outside or outsized interests who could corner the market. And the Wisconsin idea is all about self-governance and a self-directed economy. So that's what I'm going to work on as my framework. However, I don't really think that this is everybody's framework that they think about the Wisconsin idea as. Again, when we think of the Wisconsin idea, we think of anything off campus. So a lot of people associate UW Extension as the Wisconsin idea, and there are some really great lectures that just happened a couple of weeks ago on the old extension model and the new extension model. And yes, there is a difference between cooperative extension and university extension. And Gwen kind of gave her eulogy of the end of university extension ending in 2018. So what I gathered from all that extension is that the university, everything that we do is not always captured under the Wisconsin idea. Now, you have to forgive me that my background is in higher education, civic engagement stuff, so I see a lot of distinctions between outreach and engagement. So I just wanted to show my nerd self of this is what I used to really do. I was director of a group called Wisconsin Campus Compact. We tried to get colleges and universities more engaged in the community more broadly and build faculty and staff and student capacity to make sure that they're ready to do work with the community. And as you can see here, this is what I told all of my former campuses, worked with public, private, 2-year, 4-year campuses across Wisconsin. Community outreach is one dimension of a community-based experience. However, I would argue that the Wisconsin idea might be a little bit more along the lines of community-based research, where we're actually working alongside community members to define research questions that we're not just showing up and telling you what your issues are, or, hey, we have this really cool discovery. Everybody needs to know about it. And that's, I would say, kind of the traditional cooperative extension model. If you all know a little bit about the history of the Wisconsin idea and the Morrell Land Grant Act in general, this was an economic development engine, okay? The university, the reason why the federal government invested in giving land to the states was to help build our agrarian economy. And this is why the federal government invested in things like the Hatch Act and the Smith-Lever Act. The idea was to catalyze spending to advance our knowledge to help build states' economies, okay? So again, I would say that's extension. That's not always the Wisconsin idea, okay? That is one way translation of knowledge. I don't know if anybody's in the kind of natural sciences or the medical sciences. The concept of translational research is really big. Has anybody ever heard that term, translational research? Yeah, I mean, it's how do we translate this really complex stuff and give it to the masses? And that's really good work. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not always the Wisconsin idea. Gwen and others have gone on to show that the university extension movement is connected to also the social center movement, the idea of getting people together at the neighborhood and school level to build social capital in the community. I'm not going to rehash all of Gwen's talk, but in this case, the extension service was an organizing force in the community, as a matter of fact, getting people together and trying to determine what the common good is for their particular neighborhood at their particular time in their moment. However, I don't think that people often think about extension these days doing these kinds of organizing activities to advance democracy, good government, and so forth. That's why perhaps it became so easy to cut a university extension, because it wasn't something that was actually connected to helping people solve their own problems. I should say that what I'm saying is not necessarily a slight at UW Extension. Please don't think that. There are a lot of extension agents who I know personally who are doing this kind of work, but that's not necessarily the message that the University of Wisconsin system has wanted to send out to say this is what extension is. It is working with people to define their issues and challenges, da, da, da. Oftentimes when people lean on good examples of extension agents working, it's like, look at all these farmers that are getting help, and 4-H and the Master Gardener program. Again, these are more, kind of outreach activities, not necessarily engagement activities. So the message becomes that extension was a place to look for experts who can help your community solve a problem because they're connected to the experts. But let's just think about the word. When a university does extension activities, that's basically like doing outreach. And when I hear people discuss extension, even in some of the lectures that I've listened to as part of warming up for this, people mention this work as typical outreach, and that's taking university smarts and spreading it around and getting people connected to university courses, training people in accordance to best practices. It always isn't associated with listening to the community, broadly speaking, what it needs and what wisdom it has to share, and trying to co-create projects alongside the community. I remember back to discussions that I've shared with Gwen about what exact kinds of activities were connected with the Wisconsin idea. I remember that the Wisconsin idea grew up out of a concern. I mean, hopefully you all know this, but grew up out of a concern that the state was being controlled by private interests. I mean, I'm hoping I'm not saying anything that's completely transformational unless you haven't come to any of these lectures, and this is the first one. So whether it was the logging or the railroad industry or other industries, this is about being able to restore democracy to the public and ensure that they will have some kind of trust that their government is actually being run for and by the people. So this is kind of the outreach and extension activities. I just want to, when I was thinking about this, the ag extension agents, this is a group of equine therapy folks getting connected to equine therapy. Oftentimes when you think of extension and outreach activities, you also think of the asking somebody from the University of Wisconsin to come and give a lecture, for instance, at a public meeting, that kind of stuff. That's the typical outreach and extension activities. But let me turn to a quote. I didn't put this up here because it's really long, and I thought it would completely shatter all the rules of PowerPoint to put this up there. And I saw Gwen in some of her talks actually just read from a paper, so I'm going to do that. From Ed Slauson in the 1910 book, A Great American Universities. This is kind of an elite group of about 10 or 15 universities that Ed profiled. Okay, so you ready? This is about the University of Wisconsin in 1910. I'm hoping this is not total repeat. I think I got something that you haven't mentioned before in this context. The aim of some state universities is to keep out of politics. The University of Wisconsin is in politics and feels that it belongs there. Not in the sense of being a football of opposing parties or attached to the fortunes of a political boss, but as taking an active part in administrative work and in guiding the policies of the state. In some states, the president of the university only goes to the Capitol once in a biennium to beg for his allowance, in company with the representatives of other charitable and penal institutions. The faculty also religiously keep away, except perhaps of the professor of political science who wants to take his class in civics into the gallery of the House of Representatives to show them how laws are made. But in Wisconsin, professors may be seen almost at any time in the Capitol, not working the officials for bigger appropriations, but working with the officials for the good of the Commonwealth. I started to get a complete I, as in him, he, not I, but I, from the perspective of the author. I started to get a complete list working with. I started to get a complete list of all members of the faculty who were doing public work of some sort in an official capacity. But I had to give up, for the list became too long to print before I found them all. This shows how far Wisconsin University, that's what they called it, has departed from the old-fashioned ideal of scholarly aloofness and sequestration, and is taking what appears to be its ultimate function, that of a bureau of experts to the state government. Experts, I know it doesn't help my case, but it should be recognized that a state university is not doing its full duty unless it serves the people, both officially and unofficially, as a general information office to which they can apply for technical and scientific knowledge needed in their daily life and work. Who thinks that they could still say this about the Wisconsin University today? Not I. Not I either. Me either. This is a reminder that in 1910, Wisconsin was known for its highly interactive linkages and connections to politics at the state level. And this, in part, flies in the face of the traditional way that academics go about setting their research agendas and maybe even their teaching methods as well. That's what the Wisconsin idea is all about, transforming academic culture to be more outward facing. We can get to that later, but let me bring home this point, that the Wisconsin idea is all about the university working with policymakers to ensure that people and human-focused policies are crafted and enacted across the state. This is about building policy with people in mind. And that's what I'm here to talk about today, the effort that I'm helping to lead to make the Wisconsin applicable to localities across Wisconsin. This effort is in part called the UniverCity Year program. It's a pretty simple and straightforward program. In fact, I've been working in university community engagement for about 15 years, and I've always tried to explain to my family what I did for a living. And I don't know if anybody has ever been in this boat, especially you young people who thought you were going to major in engineering, but are now majoring in some random obscure thing that your parents are like, can you get a job in that? That's how my parents asked me when I told them that I was going to be working in university community engagement. But that never made sense to them until I explained this program to them. So I think that kind of, you'll see how really easy it is to understand what it is that we're doing. But let me start with this, a kind of a background to how the UniverCity Year program got started. The world is now more urban than ever. I would argue. I think more people are technically living in cities now than anywhere else. And there are many challenges that when people live in these kind of denser settlements, they face that are kind of unique to this more population coming together. Currently, there is no coherent way to get Wisconsin-Madison involved in these challenges. And so the UniverCity Alliance was born to figure out how to mobilize university folks to apply their research, teaching, and service to solving challenges to the urban world through local governments. Now, there are some entities at UW-Madison who care deeply about working with cities, but there's not like a design school, there's not like an urban studies department, all this stuff. There are people in the College of Business. There are people in the Department of Letters and Sciences. Let me just give you one example of the place where I work. It's a group called COWS. Yes, we live in Wisconsin, and yes, it's called COWS. And they call themselves a think and do tank, which works with cities across the country who want cities to be on the high road, which is advancing sustainability, i.e. being able to design things and projects with minimal impact to the environment, equity, to make sure that people have some chance of having equal outcomes for their life and quality of life, and democracy. That is to say, getting generally more people involved in transparent policy making as opposed to fewer people and only a small group of people who can control everything. So that's what COWS does, and the director is here, Joel Rogers. So if you want to know more about COWS, you can definitely ask him. People like the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies There are people in, like I mentioned, the School of Business who are in the real estate program who care deeply about affordable housing. There are people in planning and landscape architecture. You get the picture, right? I mean, there are a lot of people in a lot of different places around the university, but there's no one coherent structure to really bring them all together as to serve as like almost an entry point for the University of Wisconsin if you are at a city and you want to struggle with these issues, but you just don't know how to tap into the world-class faculty that we have here. This concept of the UniverCity Year is pretty simple, okay? You ready? We get cities on an annual basis. We work with the city to define what their priority areas are. They tell us what they're struggling with, issues and challenges, and then we match existing courses that are already being taught, so I don't have to twist any faculty members' arms to create some new bureaucratic course, and we apply those courses that are dealing with the same content area that aligns with the priorities of the local government, and it brings them together. And it adopts those particular projects as foci for the different courses that are being taken on, okay? I mean, if you're an undergrad, raise your hand if you're an undergrad in here. How many times have you thought, when am I ever going to use this in the real world, right? So the question that we take on pretty hard in this is, well, you're learning cost-benefit analysis in the La Follette School of Public Affairs. You're going to do a cost-benefit analysis for local government, those kinds of things. So I'll give you some examples of those things in a second. But why local governments? Does anybody know what local governments do? Curiosity?
They govern.
They govern. Oh, that's clever. Yeah. What kinds of issues and challenges do they deal with? I mean, I know, Joel, you can't answer the question because you knew too much.
Police.
Police, yep.
Libraries.
Libraries.
Well, you got to pick up the garbage.
Pick up the garbage,
Build
yeah.
your streets.
Yeah, you want to make sure that, like, you don't hit potholes in the way to work.
Make
Yeah.
sure that you got water coming into your faucets.
Make sure you got water, and I might even argue
Clean water.
Clean water. Yeah, we want to make sure that water is clean, you know.
Manage elections.
Manage elections, absolutely.
Recycling.
Recycling, yeah, they pick up your recycling.
Oversee rules and regulations from buildings to roads.
They manage all the land use. If I want to come in and build a giant industrial factory next to your neighborhood, I can't just automatically do it. And hopefully local government will take into consideration what kinds of negative or positive spin-off benefits there are or negative externalities to building that thing there. They control land use. I mean, you know, when I think of cities didn't just come to be, right? Somebody actually had to say, oh, what can go here and what can go here? And somebody had to purchase the land. Somebody had to tell you could do it. Anybody ever go to the bathroom, you know? Local governments usually deal with wastewater. And then, you know, that wastewater, eventually at some point, you're going to want to drink it and you want it to be clean. So it goes through like a cleaning process. That's pretty important work, isn't it? But local governments, I just did a high school career fair the other day. That was interesting. And high schoolers knew nothing about what local government did. And basically, even nobody mentioned this, where we were standing was a function of local government in the high school gym. We don't have education if we don't have local governments, okay? Local government takes on education as well. So local governments do a lot of stuff. Now, there are some differences. This is borderline breaking PowerPoint rules, but not, I think, technically. Counties are more so entities of the state, so there are a lot of state programs that counties actually run and manage. You may have heard of, you know, the public health departments or emergency management, sometimes in some cases elections, although here I think Madison we have the city clerk office. Towns which are unincorporated, you know, you'll see some kind of commonalities between these things. It just kind of really depends on where you are, because I know a local government in Erie County, New York looked different than a local government here in Madison. For instance, in Knox County where I used to live, it was a county-wide school system. So Knox County had one school system. Here we don't have that in Dane County. We have multiple school systems serving Dane County. But so from the perspective of the UniverCity Alliance board members, cities are where the action is at these days, okay? So we are definitely in the business of connecting local institutions of higher education who are in the backyards of our future local government partners. So a lot of issues and challenges are happening in the country are manifest at the local level. So let me give you an example. This is an uncomfortable example, and I'm not here to make any political statements, although I could, but I'm not going to. Let's just take immigration, for instance, okay? Which I know, how much more controversial of an issue could I bring up here? That's to get you engaged, all right? When people from different countries come into the United States of America, they have to go somewhere, right? They have to go, whether they're here, in accordance with whatever, they have to go somewhere. They have to live somewhere. They may be working. City resources are being spent on providing services to folks who are coming in. And now we're seeing issues where it comes to the federal government's efforts to find undocumented immigrants, and the city response has been to create a sanctuary city framework. These are cities who are making a very, very clear attempt to not cooperate with federal authorities, to say we are not going to share our data with you. Now, I think that is an interesting case of where there's messed up stuff at the federal level. What could be more federal than immigration? I think it's actually written into our Constitution that immigration is handled by the federal government. Yet it still has a profound impact on cities. And when the federal government has issues and challenges, and the state government has issues and challenges, who ultimately has to pick up the pieces? Cities. Cities are the ones who deal with the spillover effect. You could break this down to almost any issue. Climate change is another perfect example. Again, another politically touchy topic. Some cities really believe that what we are doing affects, the climate. Others don't, and others wish the federal government acted it up. Some cities are saying, you know what? I don't care if the federal government acts or not. We're going to pass our own climate action plans. Those kinds of things, I'm just kind of giving you an example of how our system of government is almost set up for these kinds of tensions between different levels of government called federalism. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with cities. And they have to deal with things even when there's gridlock at the state and local level. All right? Beyond that, let me see here. Okay. Beyond that, when working to address the challenges that are of most concern to citizens, we believe that working with local governments promote an attempt at addressing root causes of social issues. If we want to address climate change, it's going to require action at the local level through government agencies, public utilities, local businesses, and individual households. The federal government can't come in and tell you exactly what to do. It's the city. There's no one power utility in the United States. As far as I understand it, it's pretty well decentralized. So if we're going to have a chance of doing that, you're going to have cooperation at the local level. If things end up working out at the local level, that's when the state and federal governments take notice. This would be an example of how University of Wisconsin-Madison could be involved in politics without ever lobbying once. The approach should be that we should roll up our sleeves, work on solving problems, and see how policy can be informed based on local innovations. So let me just explain to you a little bit more about the UniverCity Year program. Okay, and again, I've given you the why, I've given you the logic, I've even tried to couch it in the context of the Wisconsin idea. I've done so well so far. And this is more details about the program. Okay, I didn't want my entire lecture to just be about the UniverCity Year program. Again, community leaders identify projects. We have an extensive scoping process that we put the local government and the University of Wisconsin-Madison faculty through. Projects are incorporated into existing course. We use a community-based learning model, which I'll tell you about that in a second. We essentially want to work with local governments who have projects that we consider to be stuck. I don't know if anybody's ever worked in a workplace where you have a project that's just kind of there and it's sitting there and you know you need to work on it, but you don't really ever find the time or the capacity to deal with it. I know I've got a couple of those things. Don't tell my boss. We struggle with. There are some things that are on our back, in the back of our minds. So this tries to get local governments to identify what those issues and challenges are and hand them over to a group of students and faculty who can provide sometimes pie in the sky, but sometimes realistic solutions to what it is that they're dealing with at the local level. We have so far worked with 3 different local government partners. The first one was the city of Monona in 2016 and 2017. They identified the areas of community media, housing, parks, and transportation. We had almost 500 students working in 23 courses. And really, how did Monona even get connected? We were talking at a meeting one time, and we told them about this initiative, and Monona said, we want to be the guinea pigs. We want to be the first ones. And wouldn't you know, they're actually giving us positive references, even though it was our first time at the game. The Dane County Board of Supervisors was our second group, so this is working countywide. Of course, Monona is in Dane County, but we specifically worked with the county level government and specifically on the legislative side of things. We didn't just work with the executive's office, we specifically worked on the legislative side. They identified housing, economic development, frequent users of county services, water and water quality and nutrient management. I can give you a ton of examples of exactly what these are, and I'm going to show you a little 5-minute video that you can get a sense of the kinds of projects that we've worked on. But Greene County is our partner this year. Again, a shout out to my crew who went to Cheese Days. We went down there. I don't know if anybody's been to Cheese Days in Greene County. But that was to, in part, help to kick off our partnership. Has anybody been to Cheese Days? I mean, raise your hand. Been to Cheese? It's amazing. I mean, it's really amazing. It's quite remarkable. So Greene County is the county in which you will find, I'm sure most people in here know about New Glarus Brewing. But there's New Glarus, the city of Monroe, the city of Broadhead, the village of Monticello, the town of Judah, the village of Browntown. So those are the kinds of places. There's also Belleville is partially in there. But the ones that I just mentioned are the localities with which we're working. This year we worked with the Greene County Development Corporation to help set priorities. And these are just a few of the projects. I'm not going to read everything to you, but these are just a few of the projects that we're taking on. One of the more interesting projects that we just took on, I'll tell you about quickly, is that they have a bunch of different theater and arts-based organizations. And what they wanted to do was get those arts organizations to collaborate a little bit more, because oftentimes they're competing for volunteers, they're competing for money, they're competing for philanthropic support. So the Monroe Performing Arts Center just hired a new director, and they wanted to bring this under the guise of the Monroe Cultural Collaborative. So my job is to know all cracks and crevices of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm not perfect yet at that, but I'm going to get there. There's a group called WeSolve. Has anybody ever heard of WeSolve? WISOLVE? Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Okay, a few people. It is a postdoctoral student and graduate student consulting organization that works on issues and challenges that are pitched to them by different folks, because they realize, oh, I want to be in academia. Oh, wait, the job market doesn't look so good. I don't want to be in academia anymore. So they decide that they want to get real world clients. And so this is a way that they address challenges. They're taking on the Monroe Cultural Collaborative to help with business planning and sustainability development through the context of doing one joint project together, which is hiring a volunteer coordinator. So that's just an example of something that we've just gotten off the ground in Greene County. I want to show you a quick video that gives you a little bit of a background of the different kinds of projects that we've done. This was actually designed for our 1-credit course that was aimed at preparing students for the kind of work that they're going to do. So you hear like an introduction, and it sounds like they're talking to prospective students, which they kind of are, but it works for this context, I think. So.
Hello, I'm Kelly Conforti-Roop. I'm the program manager of UniverCity Year. In this short video, I'm going to show you a few of the projects that students from across UW-Madison have worked on in the UniverCity Year program. Let's get started. Improving parks was a main focus for the city of Monona. In the landscape architecture class called Open Space Planning and Design, taught by professors Sam Dennis and Travis Floor, students reimagined what Winnequa Park could look like. What I loved about this class was not just students' creativity, but the visuals they created. These drawings helped me understand what students were recommending. For example, you can see in this site plan the recommendations for a sensory garden and an outdoor classroom. When you zoom in a little closer, you get more detail on the elements of the design, like a raised boardwalk. Then, in this detailed drawing, you really get a sense for what the boardwalk and the surrounding area could look like. Monona parks were also a focus of Professor Jesse Conaway's environmental studies class called Culture and Conservation, Living Ho-Chunk History in Monona Parks. As you can imagine, this class took a different perspective on designing Monona parks. This map uses Ho-Chunk language to identify the Four Lakes region. Zooming into Monona, students proposed new signage for Woodland Park to inform visitors about the cultural assets remaining in the park, and they used Ho-Chunk language to identify the species of plants and animals that thrive there. Then, in Professor Larry Mueller's Life Science Communications class called Information Radio, students had yet another take on parks and other topics. For example, let's listen to this public service announcement that a student wrote and produced for the local WVMO radio station.
Why not hold your next party or picnic
It's
in
really
Monona
low,
Park?
sorry.
Monona Parks offer you a picturesque backdrop, whether you're hosting the best barbecue of the season or celebrating a child's birthday. To reserve a park building, please call the Parks and Rec office at 608-222-4167 or schedule your event online at mymonona.com. Look for the Parks and Recreation page. The website will tell you the cost and locations of all 6 park buildings. We'll see you out there.
In Professor Jim LaGrove's landscape architecture class called Housing and Urban Design, students focused on designing distinctive and affordable housing communities in the Dane County village of DeForest. All of the students' proposals were great, and it's hard to choose a favorite. I particularly liked this one. I thought the modular units, with their vibrant colors, created a unique identity for the community. Students in Professor Arlene Johnson's environmental studies class, called Conservation Planning, developed plans to improve the water quality of Dorr and Dorn Creek in Dane County. You can see what Dorn Creek looked like the day that students were there. One thing students recommended was increasing the size of the riparian buffer surrounding the creek. As a person without a background in conservation, I appreciated the clear and well thought out nature of the students' report. Switching gears entirely, students in Professor Chris Wells's journalism class called Concepts and Tools for Data Analysis and Visualization used the software Tableau to research the issue of frequent users of county services in Dane County. For example, students used publicly available data on free and reduced lunch in schools to see where the greatest need in the county was. Looking at this chart, you can easily see that in Dane County, Madison, in green, has many students in need of assistance, especially students at James Wright Middle School. I hope this video has helped you see the wide variety of in-depth research that students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison have produced for and with communities.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you some sense of the diversity of projects that are covered under the University Alliance program. Just to give a little bit of a shout out to the different people who are on our advisory board and to give you a sense of the different people and the different institutes and centers that are on here. I don't know if you recognize any of these people, but you'll see the Morgard Center for Public Service on there. You'll see the School of Education. You'll see the School of Human Ecology on there. You'll see the Institute for Research on Poverty. You'll see the Global Health Institute. You'll see the Population Health Institute. You'll see the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, the Planning and Landscape Architecture Department, and there's the Cartography Lab who's represented on campus. So We have the biometry program, computer science, community relations, the School of Business, yeah, bunch of different people. I actually think this slide was a little out of place. Sorry. The tensions between governments is what I've already talked about. I do want to be clear and say that the work does not come without some challenges, and I wanted to analyze a little bit more about what I think the challenges are. And this is certainly not an exclusive list, but I'll just give you 3 of the challenges. So I would say democratically driven projects, defining projects alongside the community, but not just with local governments. So we had a kickoff meeting in Greene County a while ago, and we came and we said, hey, here are the projects that are being worked on this year. And, we're getting really, really excited. And we've been through this year of defining what the projects are with other local government officials. And inevitably the question came up, how did you decide on these projects? Because these were general community members that weren't really involved in the process. And the answer really was we asked local government leaders what we thought their priorities were. So I think this kind of points out a tension between sometimes our local government's always reflective of what citizens really believe. And it's a really great question. I'm not here to answer that. But it kind of, I put this slide up because it shows about a way that I'm thinking about how to better set priorities. So oftentimes it's the kind of more privileged movers and shakers and the middle third people who are the ones who are setting the agenda. Maybe you have the movers and shakers who are setting the agenda, the middle third oftentimes implementing the agenda, and the moved and the shaken are the ones that it happens to. I'm trying to think about how do we build connections across these thirds, and I think the bottom kind of shows how do you have the privileged and the willing, the disconnected and the willing, and then the bulk of the group of the middle third actors that we can work with. I don't know how to do this yet. I mean, this is not something I would say we're expert at by any means, but it's something that's coming up, and it's coming up in our broader national network of people who do this work in other places across the country. Convincing faculty to take on projects as future research endeavors. Now, this is not getting them to engage in the course. They're pretty willing to do that because those are existing courses. They don't have to teach. They don't have to think about, they do have to teach it, sorry. They don't have to create a completely new course. But faculty members are really difficult to tell what to do in the future for their research agenda. There's this little nagging concept called academic freedom. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. That really says that faculty members can do, kind of take, knowledge to wherever it leads them. So that's why we've really relied on getting them to play ball through their existing courses. And they're oftentimes folks who are really busy and aren't really incentivized, to be quite honest, because it's a structural issue, I think, to do engaged teaching and research, because it actually takes more time to publish in coordination with community partners. And they need to be publishing in national and international journals, especially I want to make sure that you all know, especially at a place like a UW-Madison, the pressure to publish in particular calibers of journals is real in almost all fields. And when you can do one publication in 6 months versus one publication in 2 years that you had to define with the community, you just think about the productivity numbers. So we help make it easier for them to get involved, but when a project is done, it would be great if we can build stronger connections between faculty and local government partners to continue research projects that take the deliverables from one-off projects to longer-term research endeavors. It's partially my job to actually understand how research agendas align with one-off projects so that it's not too much condensing to say, hey, this is totally in your wheelhouse. But it's one of our bigger struggles. I mean, even a faculty member that I've talked to who's really interested in air quality would really love to do more locally driven air quality projects. But when she goes to publish in particular journals, the scale of air quality that you need to be studying to have significant results is kind of a multi-state, even larger than a regional kind of catchment area. And so to study air quality in Dane County, it's cool, and it'll get her some brownie points, but it's not really going to get her into a publication that's in a journal that's going to publish that, or at least that will kind of be kind of respected, and I don't want to make too many more comments about that, but you get what I'm saying. The other thing that we're struggling with is implementation and follow-up. I think we're getting a fairly good model down, but in a similar vein, we're struggling to consider how to take projects and deliverables from ideas to action. That may include building things into a research agenda, but it may also be more along the lines of placing an intern to continue projects. For instance, this year we have a project to encourage women to breastfeed from a public health perspective. And once the plan is is planned, how do we put that into action to actually go out to businesses, meet with expectant mothers? Maybe it's possible that the nursing club, who needs a service project every year, which they do, how can I get them to be connected to implementing the breastfeeding education plan, as opposed to just, yep, we did a strategy plan, we're done, we're out of here, we'll see you later, good luck. But it could be engaging external stakeholders, or maybe doing something kind of blurring the lines between scholarship and action. The local governments are often, this may be of no surprise to anybody in the room, when we come with 30 projects and 30 deliverables that are about 20 to 50 pages each, some of them are 150 pages, they're a little overwhelmed after the year of engagement with us. So they have to kind of sift through that. So we're trying to figure out a good method. Once the dust is kind of settled, how do we take some of these ideas into action? We do have some early successes. For instance, Monona now has a bike and pedestrian ad hoc committee as part of their city council, which before engaging with us, they didn't have. They were known as the city where the sidewalk ends. That's what the people told me. And now they're known as a place that's actually working toward putting in more biking and pedestrian infrastructure. And that, not directly attributable to, but we contributed to the ongoing discussion in Monona and provided them with some of the research behind why they should be doing that kind of work. I also, this is kind of this praxis, where theory and reality meet. You have to have reflection, theory, and action. It's just kind of an interesting slide to be thinking about that concept. So I also want to make sure that I'm clear that we're not only trying to accelerate change at the local level, but this is also about changing the culture at University of Wisconsin-Madison. The UniverCity Alliance on campus is a cross-disciplinary effort that I've talked about already to discover the entities and people on campus who are interested in working with cities to help them address challenges. But that doesn't just mean sending out our university-based experts. It means co-designing projects alongside communities, which I've talked about already. Working with faculty who want to listen to communities and learn something from them. It also means rethinking undergraduate education to be more connected to real-world problem solving. The University of Wisconsin is not at its best if it only stays within the walls of the academy. There's a lot of real-world wisdom that we all miss if we only do basic research and teaching based on that basic research. Some people call that praxis. But what we need to do is to facilitate the thinking, is a change of culture on campus at UW-Madison. We need some kind of community engagement framework that encourages the university to authentically engage communities. That's part of why we're trying to work closely with the Morgridge Center for Public Service. They're trying to help transform UW into a more community-engaged place through the civic action planning process. So if you don't know about that, you should definitely talk to the Morgridge Center. We are but one piece of that larger puzzle, and we're glad to have them on our advisory board. But again, it kind of signals our nod to the fact that we can't just do this as a program. We need a little bit of culture change at UW. I could talk a lot more about what an ideal community engagement effort is on campus, but that's a completely separate talk. Maybe this is just a teaser of a future talk where community engagement and culture change on campus is highlighted. Interestingly, just pull out a little bit of my nerdum from my previous job. Research has shown that institutions who say that they're committed to getting the university involved in public life and democratic skill building and actually follow through on that commitment, their students show stronger later in life participation in voting and democratic skills. So when the universities say they're interested, but actually students view that as, yeah, right, you're just talking, empty rhetoric, they're actually less likely to be in the civic life of involved in their civic life of their communities after graduation. So it actually matters what universities say they're doing and what they actually do. So if we say we're about the Wisconsin idea, But we have a cool couple of programs over here that highlight that. But all the rest of the stuff isn't really exempt. It's kind of exempt under the Wisconsin idea, but it doesn't really apply to us. That's at least, I think, one reason why we should be striving to have an institution that's better connected to and responsive to the community. Kind of in closing, there are so many challenges in towns, cities, villages, counties. There are also a lot of world-class researchers at UW-Madison. Let me say it differently. There's a lot of wisdom in these communities around the state, and there are a lot of people on campus whose knowledge is incomplete without the wisdom and the insights of the community feeding into it. If universities continue to sit on the sidelines claiming, oh, we're just doing research, studying the issues and the challenges, we face even more public skepticism and criticism. We face even more threats to the Wisconsin idea. Heck, there have even been attempts to alter the language to change completely what the Wisconsin idea means. And there's a lot of the line for the human standpoint, too. If inequality in our society continues to grow, if we continue to ignore issues of changing climate and environmental sustainability, if we continue to brush off calls for making government more responsive to people's concerns, we will be in dire straits. And I think we're already seeing what happens when people start to tune out and they get really frustrated. They don't know what to do in their frustration. And if universities start to go down the road of, we're just trying to help without working with communities, without actually working alongside communities and allowing people in the real world to shape research questions and findings to get translated into reality, they may unwittingly make things worse. And we've already started to see. University of Pennsylvania is gentrifying West Philadelphia. They're pushing out poorer people, and they're getting richer people to move in around their campus in the name of community engagement. So that's the subject of another talk altogether. Again, so I've given you 2 teasers to have me back. We really do need to get at the underlying causes of these structural injustices that we see. But let's start here. Let's start working with localities and listening to them, and be the best version of the University of Wisconsin that we can be. So thank you for your time. Any questions, comments, arguments? I don't know. Yes?
From my perspective, you've really just nailed the dilemma. Really on the mark from when I think about what are the incentives or disincentives for the University of Research One to enact the Wisconsin idea as it was originally designed and being thought about. The lack of what I call an intimacy, a true connection, relationship with the community, without the incentive for that to occur, beyond what the students are doing through the classroom. They've already created the course. What things have come, how are you hoping, you've named the dilemma.
Yeah.
Are there any thoughts on bridges?
Yeah, I definitely think, I would say the coin of the realm in this regard is to, and this is going to be controversial. I always told people in my old job, I piss off people on the right and the left. So this is going to take changes and reform to tenure, the tenure process. Because if the tenure process continues to only value scholarship that is in a particular journal, that is a particular rank, and a particular kind of level of rigor, I'm not saying that community-based research is not as rigorous. It's perceived to be not as rigorous because it's influenced and informed by the community. A lot of people, when you think of science and objective scholarship, you think of being disconnected from the people who you're studying. I would say, that's kind of typically how you think of research. But if you get the community involved, it's perceived to be kind of polluting things. So if there is actually, now I'm not as expert on the names of these things, but there are different divisional committees that oversee tenure. And the one I know that at least the School of Education falls into, there's a community track underneath. I don't know if you all know much about this, but there's a community track of kind of tenure, like a route that you can go. There are a lot of things that the Morgridge Center for Public Service are doing to help faculty who are in that track get their tenure portfolios to actually go through. I mean, I even, you oftentimes think of the University of Wisconsin as, oh, you know, we're a large research one institution, it's harder here. I know somebody personally who got fired from St. Norbert College. St. Norbert College, a private liberal arts institution that does not have research as its mission because he didn't have enough publications. And he was working too much with the community. Now, if you actually go up and you look at the community-based work that he's doing, gets all kinds of accolades, it's exactly what we need to be doing, fired. So when that continues to happen, even at a small institution like St. Norbert College, we're in big trouble, especially at the research one institutions or the research intensive institutions like University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I think tenure reform is first and foremost. I think without that, I could talk about like incentivizing people through pay and incentivizing people through grants and stuff like that. And, you know, like the National Science Foundation has a thing called broader impacts. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. It's a requirement that grants have to have some kind of community linkage when they do an NSF project. There's a guy on this campus who specifically does that. So if you want to, Kevin Nemi. So if you want to talk to him, he would know a lot more about it. But this is kind of an add-on. You know, it's kind of a nice thing that this whole conversation about community engaged scholarship really took the NSF and NIH by storm. And that's kind of the best answer they have right now is to require researchers to do broader impacts. But usually broader impacts is where you get like you might do a high school presentation or you host a research intern from a local school or something like that. It's not really engaging with the community. It's like tacking on a couple of programs. So I think tenure reform, and then financial incentives are next. But and there's good work happening with the community track. I think that's a good step forward. But again, you know, higher education institution that hasn't really changed a lot in 500 years. And I'm championing radical reform to the tenure promotion process, which would make it less driven by your peers of tenure and be more driven by community people. And that's threatening. Yeah.
Well, there's a tenure fact in
As I've just completely gone after tenure, sorry.
And an AAUP member and in a department chair. I just finished writing a chair's letter to go on to the division committee yesterday, and well, first of all, if you want to make this happen at a university like this, saying you want to reform the tenure system is a non-starter. People will just see you. They want to hear anything after those two words. There is, however, I think, movement on that is from within, where there is increasingly, at least in the business school, more demand to see the service component actually means something.
And not just divisional or departmental service?
No. It's, we divide ours external and internal.
Okay.
So there's actually on our documents, it doesn't say community, but it means state, local, etc. And
sure.
we that's part of the tenure package.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I think what needs to change, I've been a professor for almost 40 years at a bunch of big universities. What does need to change is the culture. The biggest change I've experienced in my years is that people used to have an interest in advancing the institution they worked for. All the faculty I know who are superstars, most of them, work for their vita.
For their what?
Their vita, their residence.
Oh, for their vita, yeah.
Yeah, because that determines their mobility.
Mm-hmm.
That determines everything. So we've gone to a free agent model.
Yeah.
And there's not much incentive to be loyal to the institution because we had our first salary program in 9 years. So the only way somebody gets a raise is to go get a competing offer.
Yeah.
And the only way they get a competing offer is to publish in those journals.
Yep.
I don't think you're going to change that anytime soon.
I hope you're wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, but it is a good point, and I think there is more change coming from within practice-oriented fields.
Yeah.
Although, if anybody's there's a book called The Trouble with Ed Schools by a guy named David Labaree. Education schools are arguably some of the most practical places, right? Like schools all over, and you need to go out and teach, Because the education school always feels like it's not being perceived as rigorous on this campus or on any campus. They're usually kind of like the least rigorous school or college on any campus. They have more of a drive to get disconnected from issues of practice and to do more kind of objective, quantitative research that then puts them at odds with their practice-oriented field. So that's happening in the schools of education, I think, but not all practice-oriented fields. I think some are changing the norms within their own fields, and it's going in that direction. I'm glad to see that. I also think young scholars have something to do with this. There are younger scholars who come out and they actually want to do something because they've been in undergraduate courses like the UniverCity Year, and they know how great it is to get involved in the community, and then they want to be a scholar, and they say, this is really what brings meaning to my work and my life.
Well, at least in I study consumer behavior, there's a big push in the journals for social relevance and not just small incremental hard science kind of model. So I'm happy with particle physicists
just doing the particle physics. Yeah.
Wondering about the origin of the universe.
Figure it out.
But any field that interfaces the public, like the business school, law school, etc., education, I think do have an obligation. And I think it's I think you don't have to monkey with the tenure system to get people to have a greater social consciousness.
Yeah, and we're working within the constraints of our system, and we're finding a lot of faculty who want to do that work and are doing it, regardless of changes of tenure process. So, yeah, I'm not saying that faculty aren't doing anything and we need this to be able to move forward, but I think it's a structural challenge that we will always keep bumping up against. So, yeah, was there another hand up in the back? Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a former legislator and somebody who's watched state government for over 30 years, I really enjoyed what you had to say, because quite frankly, you can talk all you want to about publishing and research that, gets other universities all excited, but if you're really interested in getting the legislature and governor to support the university, it's going to come from the kind of local community research that you were speaking about in your remarks tonight.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree, and that's why I took this job. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So is your goal then, you're talking about communities and local and counties, but are you hoping that some of this sifts upwards to the state and federal? Or you just want to keep it down where you have maybe more control down low?
It's a good question. If Joel, I don't know if Joel wants to say anything about that, but I think our intention right now is to keep kind of the innovations at the local level. However, if we get some really good ideas on some things and we're seeing issues pop up again and again and again in communities, water quality, I'll just give you I'm like not an expert in water quality, but I'll tell you that this one dumb experience that I had that it's not my problem, but it was a fundamental issue. Greene County wanted to do a county-wide water quality project to remove phosphorus from wastewater. And when I got 4 or 5 localities in the room about this, well, then they were like, well, that's not my watershed area, and I don't participate in the trade program, and da-da-da. Monroe's doing its own thing, and we got our own consultant that we're doing. Browntown, we're doing our own thing. And it was it seemed like the structure of the way that the floodplain kind of, I don't know what they're called. Again, if somebody who's a water quality expert could probably explain it better than I am. But the way the jurisdictions work between water quality and whether or not they're paying into a phosphorus trading system, almost like this kind of cap and trade for phosphorus. Maybe Joel, I don't know if you understand that better, Joel, but there were just some structural issues that I saw, oh, wow, if we see this in community after community, maybe this gives us fuel to the fire to say we really need to change this, because it doesn't incentivize localities to think of, or counties to think of their their floodplains from a countywide system. They're thinking very myopically, and they do not kind of adhere to these current jurisdictional boundaries that we have between cities and floodplain places. Yeah. That's as good as I can understand it. Sorry, y'all. I'm not a water quality expert. Yeah.
Do you think there's an appetite in both directions, whether it's from the cities or from the universities, to create model programs that can be replicated or adapted from one city to another? And that kind of ties in this business about, well, it's not just about awards, it's about rewards, you know? Then it starts to have more impact.
Yeah, I definitely think there's an appetite for replication across cities. And actually there's a national initiative that we are part of called, it's dangerous to say EPIC around these parts because EPIC usually means a software company. It's called EPIC-N, Educational Partnerships for Innovations and Communities Network. And I don't know how many projects have been off the ground between our 35 universities, Joel? Some thousands?
About 1,000 projects.
Yeah.
About 200 cities now.
Yeah, about 200 cities have engaged in this kind of work. So this is a replicable model, and I do think the more and more we see and the kind of projects we dive into, we're going to start to see common issues and challenges that come up across localities, and they're going to want to see, oh, well, what'd you do in Dane? What'd you do in Monona? What'd you do in Greene County? Next year, I didn't mention this. Next year, we're going to be working with Pepin County. You know where Pepin is? Okay. Yeah, a lot of people don't. There are only 7,500 people who live there. It's 3 hours north, and it's between, roughly, La Crosse and Eau Claire on the Mississippi River. You follow the Chippewa River down from Eau Claire, and it flows into the Mississippi. You'll pass Durand, the city of Durand, and then it'll flow out into Stockholm, Wisconsin. That's where we will be spending most of our time next year. So. A great question. Cities and towns and villages and counties apply to be partners. Not every locality can. I mean, I didn't even say this. Localities do pay to be a part of this initiative, which some may think is a controversial thing. We view it as making and building a sustainable program because it's really hard to get money from the legislature to do these things right now. And skin in the game. Localities, if they don't pay something, it's really easy for them to just disappear and forget about you. But if their city council actually pass an ordinance to authorize funding, then they become a little bit more interested and the stakes get higher for them. Yeah, we don't want this to be a good old boys network of only people who know us get to participate. We open it up wide, and I never in 1,000 years would have dreamed that Pepin County would be our next UniverCity Year partner. Hold on, did you have a question, sir? Oh, you didn't have a question. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Do you work much with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities?
Yeah, we do work with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities directly and indirectly. I mean, they help us promote the program. We've done a podcast with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. I just was at their conference the last Thursday. Just so you all know, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities is the main professional association that helps train and be a professional development entity for cities and villages specifically. So we've done that. We've also talked about doing some jointly hosted. We're a partner on an initiative called the Legacy Community Alliance for Health effort on the UniverCity Alliance, which works with localities who want to incorporate health in all policies. So they're a partner on that. Yes. So I mean, the answer is yes, we're in touch with them, and they're trying to give us a platform to share what it is that we're learning, and maybe do some trainings with them in the future.
It seems like that would be a good way to do this. If you have a model program that other people might want to know about.
Yeah, that's another way that they could be a great partner.
You might want to describe we have buckets of policies that we're recommending. Do your 5-point intervention stuff. You do that one-pager we both like.
What? Which one is it?
Stuff on water, stuff on...
Oh, the menu. The menu. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. We've just put together, this was kind of in collaboration with our partners. We put together a menu of services, like typical projects that we can deliver. And that's around economic development, kind of planning and land use issues. There are sustainability issues. Water quality is a distinct one that we've pulled out. because water quality is an issue within itself, and it involves more people than just kind of a broad sustainability issue. Housing and communications issues. So these are like 6 areas. I think there's one more that I can't remember right now. And we kind of give them examples of deliverables that we've done with other communities, and it gets them thinking, because sometimes communities come to us and they just say, we want to work with you. Well, then we say, well, what do you really want to work on? What are your priorities? And they're like, well, I mean, they kind of know, they kind of don't know. So when we kind of provide this is what other communities have wanted us to do. They're like, oh, yeah, that sounds great. But I think, I wish it was a better process in that. Some come to us with a very clear understanding of what exactly they want. Pepin came to us with a clear understanding of what they want, and they didn't need the menu of services. Other people kind of get something, because we need to be realistic about what we can deliver. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to think that we can do full construction plans for them that are signed off by a professional engineer, and you could take this and go build your new park tomorrow. It's not like that. It's initial drawings, initial concepts, background research, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, not all their priorities we can address, but do our best. Other questions? Yeah.
Do the communities get to see like every student project, or do you get to pick them and show it to them? Or
do the communities get to see every project? Yeah, typically, though not always, but typically I would say in about 75% of the time, the students actually do a presentation for the community, and that could be to a city council. In fact, one of our civil and environmental engineering classes this year is doing a video that they're going to be sending to some of the community partners. So yes, they get to see the deliverables. And in fact, I did pull this up so that you could also see. So if you go to our website, UniverCity.wisc.edu, you can see here, so let's go to our first community, Monona. You can actually go down and see all the projects that we've done, and you can download the deliverables that were produced for the localities. This has been a huge selling point for us, because we can actually show communities, what can you produce? This is what we can produce. Go and download every single one of them if you want. And so yeah, you can see. There are a couple that are not available, but only a couple. So some of those are because of privacy concerns with students and stuff like that. So, any other questions? Yes, the legislator in the back.
Yeah, I've always thought of the UW, or the whole idea of UW extension as the manifestation of the Wisconsin idea.
Yeah.
But I was a little confused. Earlier in your remarks, you made reference to UW extension and UW cooperative extension.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between them?
Yeah, I am not the expert on this. Gwen, do you want to take a crack? Because University Extension was established first, before cooperative extension.
Yes, hi, who am I speaking to? Oh.
Yeah.
Hi. So in 1906, this university
Can you give
established
this to
University Extension, okay? So
it was all sorts of different things from it was sort of based on the ag outreach that was already going on, and all the Hatch Act things, and I'm trying to figure out how to really lay this out. So ag stuff was sort of going on. University, I'm sorry, I'm not doing well. I'm trying to figure out how to, it's really complex, which is why a lot of people don't know what happened when. So I'll just say late 1800s, ag stuff is going on. Short courses, people going out and doing farmers institutes out around the state. And so things were going on in terms of the ag school reaching out to the state. But that wasn't called extension at that time, okay? They talked about it as extension activities, but it wasn't an extension division. It was just sort of the normal way that the ag school was behaving based on the Morrill Act, okay? So it happened at a lot of other places, but that's how the ag part happened here. In 1906, Charles McCarthy, actually, the guy who wrote the book, The Wisconsin Idea, and established the Legislative Reference Bureau, he persuaded the president of the university that people in Wisconsin wanted, people who didn't get to come down to the university, but people all over the state were interested in education. and continuing education as adults. And you know, to make their cities better and their jobs better and all sorts of things. And so they established different programs where they would go out and go to factories, or people are working in factories, and give them more education about things that help them do their factory work better, and so that they could move up the line. Things that actually were real applications that changed how processes worked. And so that was sort of based on the idea of what was going on with the ag people. Okay, well, let's do something for this. They said the son of the in the factories, just like the sons of the farmers. And they always talked about the sons, but they did bring in the women later. But then by 1914, the federal government came up with a program that was kind of going back again, referencing the ag stuff. And this was the Smith-Lever Act that was passed in 1914. And this established what was called cooperative extension. And it was cooperative because it was funded with 3 funding streams: federal, state, which was generally the higher education institution, and then county, so that everybody had skin in the game and nobody could take it over, and it was going to be a cooperative thing. And so that, again, is back in sort of more focused on the rural areas, and it's a federally directed program. I hope that helped. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. Thanks a lot for coming.